Excited to have both Ethan and BlitheringGenius here for our first ever live stream on my YouTube channel, and kind of for the Platonist podcast as well. So today we've got these two fine gentlemen here, and we're going to be having a discussion around Platonism, represented by Ethan, and representationalism, represented by BlitheringGenius. So without further ado, I'm going to let those guys introduce themselves, and we're going to jump into the conversation. So, Ethan, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Ethan. I've been on here a few times now on your channel. A member of Platonic Path. I'm a Platonist. Um, Live here in Idaho, USA, and I'll be arguing for the Platonic position tonight. So, um, yeah, I reached out to Blithering Genius after watching his discussion with Arval, and I thought it was really interesting. I actually watched it originally when it first came out some years ago, and then it just recently popped up on my YouTube again, and I gave it another listen, and I thought it was really interesting, and I thought both people had some good perspectives, and I had some criticisms of both sides in that, so I reached out to Blithering Genius on X, and we got into a conversation on there, and then he was kind enough to accept an invitation to have a conversation and record it. So here we are, and then I'll let Blithering Genius introduce himself.
Okay, well, yeah. I'm Blithering Genius. Hello. Yeah, so I don't know how to describe myself in a way that's relevant, but I talk about issues dealing with modernity, but also philosophy and biology, and especially the intersection of philosophy and biology, I guess you could say. And now, as I understand it, this discussion is specifically focusing on epistemology, or maybe we should say theories of knowledge, right? So I think if I understand your use of the word Platonism, it's a bit broader than that. It's a more broad kind of, I guess, almost a religion or quasi-religion. But as I understand it, we're going to focus in on questions of knowledge. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's really what we had originally discussed, and why I was interested in having a conversation with you. Platonism, of course, like you said, it is broad. It is more of a religion, but I would specifically like to discuss, nature of truth, nature of knowledge, and how we can come to discover it, or if we can come to discover it. So, yeah, I think that's probably the purview in which we'll be having this discussion. And if it kind of trails out of that a little bit, we can always bring it back in. So.
Okay, and I think you brought up the discussion I had with Arval. Um, Now, I've had several discussions with him about various things, but I'd be interested to get your summary of that discussion, because to me it seemed like it was just stuck. Like we spent hours, but we didn't get anywhere because it seemed to be stuck on the question of objective truth. That Arval, for him, that's a core presupposition which he cannot reject or even really question, right? And so he kept saying, well, we must have this, like in your system, where is objective truth? And I kept saying, well, I don't have that concept in my system, right? I don't believe there is such a thing as objective truth. And so that really was the sticking point. But I'm curious what it seemed like from your perspective.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I got from it too. And I think once you guys raised this point, it seems like you said, it got a little stuck. You were kind of going in circles. Um, it was really interesting to listen to. I could tell both of you were a little bit frustrated at times. And I think really what I got from it was I think Arval was arguing in a sense, and I don't want to misrepresent him here. Maybe I'm misunderstanding where he's coming from, but it almost seems like he was trying to make knowledge out to be propositional. And it seems like you were really criticizing that, and I thought rightfully so. So I was actually, kind of taking your line of reasoning there with making knowledge propositional. as being a mistake when it comes to epistemology. So that was kind of my, I guess, critique of Arval in that video, was that it seems like he was defending that, or if that's not what he was saying, at least he wasn't clarifying that knowledge isn't propositional, because as Platonists, and as we see in the dialogue Theaetetus, they deal with that and they show that knowledge can't be propositional because it's still in that realm of belief. And of course, anytime you try to make knowledge out to be belief, you're instantly directed into, the Gettier problem, the three horns. So that was what I got from that video. I thought there was a lot of interesting discussion surrounding the forms and what that means. And he was trying to get you to account for mathematics. He was really questioning, like, well, how is it useful? And I thought he raised up a lot of good points there. His solution was, well, that's in the realm of forms. And I thought there was a little bit of talking past one another about what the forms are. So I thought it would be good to have another conversation and maybe come at it from a little bit of a different angle here. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the summary of what I got from it. It also is a really long conversation, so you guys got into a lot of different areas, but those were kind of the key points that I really wanted to hone in on.
Yeah, those were the ones we mainly focused on. I mean, it was a long conversation, but it was a lot of repetition. So I think, yeah, in a way, we didn't get really into very much. But anyway, I don't know if you want to start out by framing it or by introducing your notion of knowledge, and then maybe, we could take it from there, and I can try to explain my version or my notion of knowledge.
Sure. Yeah, I would really like for you to lay out kind of this idea of representationalism. But according to the Platonist worldview, we are epistemic realists. So we accept that knowledge is something that is real and discoverable, and that is due to the fact that the world is intelligible. And so in order to attain knowledge, one has to move toward those intelligibilities. And this is really done at the level of being, meaning it's not something that is representational. It's not something propositional. It's inerrant, which means it's actually, you actually have to, in a sense, unify with it and embody that in your very being. A good example, and actually I got this from Eric, I thought it was a great way of putting it, but it's that something like, to believe that justice is good, that would be a belief. But to say, I try to live justly because I believe it to be good, that would be correct belief, whereas to be just would be knowledge. Just like the knowledge of music can only be known by a good musician. You can read music theory, you can study it, but that's not going to be true knowledge until you actually master music itself and you can, pick up an instrument and play it masterfully. That is the true knowledge, and that cannot be conveyed between subjects because it is something that is a direct experience, a direct unification. And as soon as you try to convey that, you are now kind of breaking it down and introducing, division in a sense when you're trying to communicate it to another subject. So they can learn in a sense and be directed toward that knowledge by studying something like music theory. We would, I think, call that, kind of like a correct doxa or a correct belief would be something like music theory. Plato, of course, has the divided line, so he has different degrees of coming to know truth, moving toward truth. At one end, you have like imagination, which is image thinking, very basic. And then at the other end, you have what's called noesis, which is true union with the intelligible content, which we call the forms. And then directly below that, you would have what's called dianoia, which is like mathematical reasoning. So you can think of that as like logic proper, discursive reasoning, etc. It's still in that realm of belief, but it is more so approaching knowledge to a more accurate degree, I guess I would say.
So, we can use that example of music, but so you believe that there's some kind of union, some sort of mystical union with knowledge that exists in a transcendental realm, that basically there's some kind of crossing of the soul to another realm where it communes with the forms or something like that, right? Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Sure. I think there's a lot of confusion when people talk about, oh, there's like this realm of forms and then there's the realm we're in. They're kind of creating these hardline separations which just aren't there. It's more of a kind of gradient that flows into one another. It's almost like the way I've been thinking about it lately is if you think of the animal kingdom and how we categorize animals, it's kind of like Russian nesting dolls. So, there's like a beautiful object, but that is not the same as beauty itself. So, um, sorry, I just
Well,
got
yeah, it's
completely
always a
distracted by
hierarchical
what popped up on the
structure.
screen there.
Um, well, but let's take the example of music. Okay, so you were saying you can't really know music until you can play a musical instrument or something. I would disagree with that. I mean, I think you can know music by listening to it, you can know music by playing it, you can know music theoretically. These are all ways of knowing, and these are sort of different. You're learning patterns from experience in all of those cases, right? You are learning these abstract patterns which you then can apply to something like, listening to a song or playing an instrument. But a person might know musical theory and be totally incapable of playing an instrument. But in your notion, so I mean, I guess I'll throw out the question. I was going to save this for later because maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but like we have algorithms that can not only like play music, but they can generate songs, right? They can create new songs, and they learned the knowledge necessary to do that by abstracting it from the raw data of music, right? Now, are these algorithms communing with some other, or do they fit your Platonic model, or are they some kind of exception to it?
That's a really good question. You're talking about like AI generated music and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it can basically generate music that's, I would say, passes the Turing test, or at least, we don't know whether the trending hits on Spotify were produced or composed by humans or by AI,
Right.
because the
Well, I
same
guess
algorithm essentially is happening in both the brain and the computer.
except that the computer is actually programmed by the brain or by the human, by the mind. So I would say the difference there is that with AI, it's really just a kind of imitation, and sure, it would in a sense fall on that scale of knowledge. I would just put it more at like a kind of discursive logical level of knowledge, to where it's not knowledge proper. Like you can't give AI an instrument and have it make something beautiful. It's taking a bunch of different things and kind of putting them together, but it was programmed to do that by a mind.
No,
So
no,
I
no,
guess
it
that's the
wasn't. It
difference.
learned
Is
how to do that. That's the thing. That's the thing with generative AI. Like the music theory is not programmed into the AI. The AI learns musical theory or language or anything else simply by abstraction from raw data.
okay, which is why I do think musical theory is approaching knowledge, but it's not to the same sense that the mind. Okay, I mean AI isn't self-generated, right? It's created by a
No,
mind. You
no,
agree
but
there?
there's a very simple algorithm that learns knowledge from data, and that's how it works. It's not nobody, like, let's say you have an AI program that can compose music. Nobody had to tell it how to compose music. All they did was they fed an enormous amount of music into a neural network learning algorithm,
Right.
which then abstracted the patterns of music and can then combine those patterns to produce new music, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
language, or pictures, or videos. So we see here an analog to what our cerebral cortex is doing, right? And I just wonder how you would make sense of that in your framework. Because I
Well,
don't think
again,
that people are so creative by comparison. Like, they're doing the same thing. They're not creating radically new things. They're taking existing patterns, modifying them slightly, experimenting, right? And if that wasn't the case, there wouldn't be such a thing as music theory.
Right, and I agree with you there. Music theory is, like I said, I believe that would be at that level of kind of like logical discursive reasoning, and it absolutely does lead one to that level of, direct kind of intuitive understanding of these patterns. But I wanted to back up a little bit here because you talked about knowledge of music with, you can listen to a song and know music that way, you can learn how to play, you can study music theory, all these different ways that you can know music. So I want to ask you, if someone were to hear a song and then a musician were to hear that same song and they understand the musical scales and everything that goes into that, is their knowledge the same or is it different? If so, what is the difference there?
Well, they're going to experience it differently because they have different knowledge. Because in the case of the musician, they can relate the sound patterns in the song to patterns which might be, say, notes, in formal musical notation, or possibly they relate it to finger movements when you're playing an instrument, or the singing, and maybe a professional singer. So everybody is going to experience that differently because they have different experiences, different raw data from which they have abstracted patterns. So a person who knows music only by listening to it and has never tried to play a musical instrument, well, might have a very complex and comprehensive knowledge of music, right? They might be able to repeat the lyrics for all kinds of songs and know the notes, not like in notation, but know them like by ear, right?
Hmm.
So they're all forming a structure of knowledge in the brain from data, but if you put in different data, you'll get a different structure of knowledge.
Okay, so I understand you're saying it's different, but would you say you can have a deeper understanding of the knowledge? Like there's degrees of knowledge, like one can know music better than the other, like the musician listening to the song knows it better than the one who doesn't understand how to play music, they just listen to the song?
Well, I mean, better is a value judgment. I don't think one knows them necessarily better. They just know that they have different knowledge because they have different experiences from which the knowledge is abstracted. So if
Really?
again, if you're
Okay.
only listening, you're only going to have knowledge that pertains to listening. You're not going to have knowledge of playing, right? You're not going to have any knowledge of finger movements. But somebody who plays guitar, when they hear a guitar solo, their fingers might start moving in the way that they would to play the guitar solo, because they have that pattern. They have that motor pattern, right? Whereas somebody who knows it only by ear essentially only has the sensory patterns and I guess emotional patterns that they've abstracted from. So we're all going to have different patterns. Well, people are going to have different patterns depending on the data that they have absorbed, and also to some extent what they're interested in and what they, attend to, and so on.
Wait, so you don't think that someone can know something better than someone else?
Well, no, I didn't say that. What I said is that the notion of better is when you're saying like a music theorist knows a song or knows music better. What does that even mean? Better for what? For
Has a
what
deeper
use?
understanding?
I don't
Has
know.
a more broad
Deeper,
application?
broader for sure, but deeper. I don't know if it's really going to be deeper. It's going to be
You
more
don't think it's
broad because again, it's covering more modalities, right? It's covering, say, formal notation, like the notes on a piece of paper, and it's covering the hand movements, right? And they might have know some musical history or something, so they might have a different understanding that's broader. But in what sense is it better?
well, they would be able to understand the harmonies between the intervals, how to apply them to make more harmonious music. Do you think that all
Well,
music is the same? It's
no, no. But
just a
if
matter of different
somebody,
music, or is there better music?
well, I don't think there's really. I mean, I think a musical taste is quite, personal, but I don't think that it's better to be able to play an instrument per se or to know formal notation for music. I don't consider that better. Why would I need to know that, right? So you could argue that all music is just kind of silly and useless, right? That it's just meaningless or it's an illusion or something, and so that none of this knowledge is particularly useful. But I wouldn't say that the musician's knowledge is better for being a musician because that's what he does, right? So he has acquired the knowledge that pertains to his engagement with reality. So of course he's going to be able to play an instrument better, but the person who doesn't play an instrument listens to the love song and, gets a little, goes off into a little fantasy for a while, or kind of swoons over the beauty of it or whatever, right? That they're experiencing it in their own way through their own knowledge. And I wouldn't say one has better knowledge.
Okay, so by better, I simply mean that one has more knowledge. Like one is closer to understanding music than the other. So if someone only had a single note and all they knew was one single note and they could press a button, play this note, a few seconds go by, play the note again, 10 seconds go by, play the note again, and they call this a song, they're applying one note, versus like a Mozart, would you say, oh, well, it's not a matter of better, it's just a matter of different? You can't really say who has a deeper understanding of that knowledge or who has more knowledge of music. Would you still hold that
But you're
position?
presupposing some kind of Platonic music that exists out there that Mozart has a
I'm
better
not.
understanding
Did you
of.
hear my question?
Yes,
I'm
I
not
heard your
presupposing
question.
anything.
No, you
Just with
are.
that example.
Right. Okay, well, so in that example, what is your question that I'm supposed to answer here? So one knows how to play one note. Okay. What does he do with
hmm
that? Is he composing?
Sure, he does a
Okay, so
note,
does he
couple
have a big
seconds go
audience?
by,
Is he
another
is he
note.
killing it with that one note? Is he
What
getting?
does that matter? What does that
Well, I
matter?
don't know. What's the point of doing this?
The
What's
the
the point of
question here. Let me
saying?
repeat the question. Sorry,
Okay,
let me repeat the question in case it got lost there.
I didn't get
Would you
lost.
say? No, I said in case I got lost there,
Okay.
like in case the question got lost amongst that. Um, with this example, the one person who can only play a single note, and the other person, like Mozart, who can play, a range of different notes and intervals and put a whole symphony together, would you say that their knowledge is the same qualitatively, but just different? Or would you say one is actually has a higher degree of knowledge when it comes to music?
Well, obviously Mozart's knowledge of music is going to be more, right? More comprehensive,
Okay.
which I've already said, right?
Right. Okay. So it's not just a matter of different types of knowledge. Actually are degrees of knowledge. You would agree there?
Well, about something, right? So
Right.
if
Yeah.
you've only ever encountered
Music.
one note versus you've listened to the entire Beatles catalog, right?
hmm
You've had a lot more data to process, and so your knowledge is going to cover the data you've processed. And if you're playing a piano, that's data your brain is going to process, and you're going to cover that data too. So you can have knowledge that's more comprehensive of different kinds of interactions with reality versus knowledge that's very confined to one little thing. But that doesn't make it one better or worse in some ultimate sense, right? They're just different because they cover different data.
Okay. So if two people were exposed to the exact same amount of music, let's say both had listened to the entirety of Mozart, all of Mozart's compositions, they heard them all, but one person has studied them and can play all of Mozart. Is there still just, what's the difference there?
Well, I've already said this. We're doing the same thing that happened in the other debate, right? One has more comprehensive knowledge that covers another
Hmm.
modality.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
that's all there is to
Let's,
it. And I think,
maybe it would
again, I
help to
think
move
you are
on from
trying
this.
to get to this notion that there's the real music out there in the Platonic realm, and these people, one person is closer to it than another, right? But that's not what I believe. That's not my position.
Well, what do you mean when you say comprehensive then? You're saying
Covers, I've already
data,
said that,
right?
covers more, right, more possible interactions, more possible embodied experiences, if you want to get right down to it, right? So somebody
hmm
could have a vast knowledge of anything like frogs, and it could be a certain type of knowledge, like they've seen a lot of different frogs. So they can recognize, tell this distinction between these two frogs, or they see a frog and they're like, I know what kind of sound that frog makes, right? Now, this person might not have the formal knowledge of biology. They might not have some other kind of knowledge that relates to frogs, but, they might not know the genome of the frog, but they've experienced a lot of different frog sounds and seen a lot of frogs. So they have a comprehensive knowledge of frogs versus somebody who's only ever seen one frog. Yeah, it's just like, or only seen like, pictures of frogs or something. There's going to be a difference in the knowledge because there was a difference in the data that the knowledge was abstracted from.
Okay. Maybe it would help if you laid out your epistemic system here. Since I did that and we're kind of going off that now, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from with it. So if you could lay
Well,
out,
I can do that. I don't know if you
representationalism, I think it'd
have
be
laid it
helpful.
out, but I can. I mean, I think we need to go back maybe, but I'll try to lay it out. Now, I don't think this is something that's very easy to explain, right? So I pointed you to the essay that went through different theories of knowledge and all that, right? So to try to explain it briefly, basically, the cerebral cortex is a general purpose pattern abstraction and recognition machine. And so you feed data into it and it abstracts patterns, and then it'll also recognize those patterns later in data. I mean, that's the basic understanding of what I call conceptual knowledge. So I gave those three layers. There are multiple layers of knowledge, right? There's procedural knowledge, which is the knowledge that's, I guess, intrinsic to the brain itself, right? It's innate. It's in the DNA. You're born with it. And part of that innate knowledge is that the brain has this method of abstracting knowledge from experience. So you first have this, innate ability to abstract knowledge. Then the brain goes about doing that from the data that it receives and produces conceptual knowledge, something like concept, of a frog, or concept of a song, or concept of, mom and dad, ball, whatever, right? We're forming these concepts, and these concepts are abstractions from experience, from embodied experience. And these concepts are basically stored in a kind of grammar. So we have like a grammar of concepts that is formed in the brain by abstraction from data. And then as we go through the world, we're basically generating models using those concepts to explain the data of experience and to generate action as we go through the world. So for example, and it involves three modalities really: sensory, motor, and emotional. So for example, when you walk up to a door, and you can try, observing yourself next time you do this, your hand will automatically reach out for the door. You will anticipate feeling something when you grasp the door. When you grasp the door, your hand will automatically turn and you'll push, right? So all of those motor events, that's a pattern, right? And then the visual experience of the door handle is also a pattern. And the idea or the desire to go through the door is also part of that. So those things are all integrated in concepts, and those are, always being applied as we go through the world. And then, so we have procedural knowledge, we have what I call conceptual knowledge. Then we have representational knowledge. Like, for example, I know that I'm sitting at a desk, looking at a computer, talking to you. That's a representation. It's a model, right? That model is constructed out of concepts, and the concepts are what provide it with meaning. And, because there are regularities to things, right? So I apply those concepts to this situation to generate this model. This all happens automatically, subconsciously. But then there's also formal knowledge, like musical notation or mathematical theorems or scientific theories, where we write it down, we take it outside the brain, we communicate it. And so there are all these different kinds of knowledge, and they often get conflated, right? So this can be a source of confusion. If you think everything is like propositional, for example, right? Well, you need concepts to have propositions. Or if you confuse, or if you think everything, is one kind, like you don't take into account that you have a kind of knowledge that's embodied in the structure of your body. Like the brain knows how to abstract knowledge, the kidney knows how to filter waste out of the blood. Okay, so that's a kind of knowledge too, which was also induced from, the data of evolution of, many, many, many natural experiments. So yeah, so those are the layers of knowledge in my theory, and I explain the relationship between them, right? There's procedural knowledge, which, generates the representations and the concepts. And then we take that outside our heads, we make it into formal theories, mathematics, science, and so on. and that's formal knowledge. So I don't know if that might have been very well, that's very brief, so it might not be very easy to understand, but yeah, that's basically the best I can do in a short period of time.
Okay. I think I was tracking there. I also did read, I didn't make it all the way through that article you sent me on epistemology. I did make it through a good amount of, and I had a bunch of questions. That's when we kind of got into conversation and set this up. So I think I tracked that fairly well. I think what's going on here is what Platonism is really concerned with, and maybe this is responsible for the talking past one another in some of these conversations with Platonists, is that we're really concerned with what is that, data and patterns do a lot of heavy lifting in this framework. And so we are trying to understand what data and patterns are. Like you say, they're abstractions, but you're not really getting into it. So you're kind of just giving yourself that, saying, oh, data, abstractions, patterns, and then from that, you're extrapolating the system. But we're trying to get to the heart of it. Like, what is the essence of knowledge? If it comes from data, if it comes from these patterns and abstractions, what is the content of those pattern and abstractions?
Well,
and what is the implications of that?
They are regularity, so any kind of regularity, basically, within data. Now, that's also another very broad thing, right? But we do have algorithms that do this. I keep going back to that. But, the basic principle is information compression. So anything that can compress data counts as a regularity. Or if you have a regularity, you can compress data because you have the same thing occurring multiple times. So instead of representing the full thing, you can represent it by like a pointer to a concept that we'll say represents the regularity. Okay, so this is how, I can't really explain it here, right? Because it involves math, information theory, and some of these concepts are a little bit difficult to talk through. But I'm not appealing to that as some kind of black box. I mean, you can look into this. You can read about information theory and machine learning and things like that. Yeah, so basically, when I say pattern, I mean some regularity in the data. And here we're talking about the data of embodied experience. And if you think about what an organism has to do to support its moving around in the world, let's say you want to do a certain behavior, whatever something happens. Well, what is something, right? And what is behavior? Well, those are patterns, right? Those are regularities. They're not exactly the same, but they're, similar, right? Like what makes a tree a tree? That it fits a certain pattern. So I agree.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you, so I understand, it seems like that kind of pushes the question back a little bit because you say, well, a pattern is a regularity found in data. So I have to ask then, what are you describing as data? Like, what is data? Because that's, again, just you're kind of taking that as a given.
Sensory, emotional, and motor data. So, for example, and this is all interleaved, right? So, for example, when you perceive something, like say a cup, like I have a coffee cup on my desk here, when you perceive something, you orient toward it, you move, right, your head, and that predicts what you will see. And then your eyes make a series of saccades. They kind of jump around. They're kind of measuring the proportions of the object by jumping around. And that's an example of a pattern of saccades, right? Or a pattern which is head movement followed by saccades with certain, visual experiences correlated with that. So knowledge essentially consists of correlation is another way to say regularity, consists of correlations that exist within data. And I can't really, like, if you're asking me to, my background is machine learning, but I can't explain all of that now, and I don't want to appeal to it as some kind of authority, right? So I don't want to.
No, that's fine.
So
that's fine.
I guess
we don't have to get too much into the weeds, but I do want to ask, because you just described, syntax, and you described types of data. and like kinds of data, but I'd like to know what is data itself. If all those things have data in common, what is the data?
Well, the best we can do is say information, which is a distinction between two states or different states of some object. But in this case, sensory receptors, motor neurons, and the emotional system, like the emotional states that we have. And it's from that raw data.
Is emotional states?
Sorry, what?
So it comes down. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Are you saying data is emotional states?
Well, no, that's a component of it. Because if we didn't have
so
emotions,
what is it though?
We can't go deeper than to say information. Well, like we can't. We're never going to. I mean,
information.
There's an infinite regress of description, right, or of definitions. I mean, we're never. We can never get to some bedrock definition that is beyond definition. So I'm going to have to start somewhere. So I'm basically starting with information.
Okay. So you're starting with information, and you described information as being changes in states.
Yeah, or
I just want to make
distinctions.
sure, correct me if I'm wrong here. Distinction between states.
We could
and
say
then,
firing rates of neurons. I mean, to be simple. I don't know if that's simple.
Wait, sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Well, we could just say firing rates of neurons if you want to put it that way.
Firing rates of neurons. Okay, but that itself is information, right? Like that is a type of information. Like you have information that it's firing states of neurons. I mean, that right there seems already
your knowledge
laden with.
When you perceive something, that is consists of firing rates of neurons.
Okay, and how'd you arrive there?
Well, I mean, that's our model of how the brain works. That's our understanding of the brain. And
so
again,
knowledge. Sorry,
we have analogs.
Continue.
We have mechanical analogs, and they're not identical, but they're analogs.
Okay, so you're saying that knowledge, it's produced by the brain. Is that what you're saying? Do you take that kind of empirical approach?
Well, again, I made this distinction about different types, right? So you have, say, when
I'm
you
talking about all knowledge, though.
Well, again, I don't think, what does that mean?
Okay, well, you describe different types of knowledge. So they are all a kind of knowledge. So knowledge is what they all have in common. So what would that knowledge be?
Yeah, so there's that broader notion.
Why is there? Okay.
There is a broader notion, which is any kind of information that has been selected to do something, right? So I mean, like,
which
again,
is
you could say
firing, right?
You could say that genes, the information in genes, is knowledge, right?
So would you say knowledge is not qualitative then? It's quantitative? Like, because you described it as comprehensive, which just means a large collection of data, but you're not really willing to make a value judgment there, or maybe only from a kind of subjective standpoint, but you're not willing to say there's like an objective, qualitative aspect to knowledge?
Well, I'm not sure what that means, an objective qualitative aspect. So knowledge, when we're talking about knowledge, we're always in some context where we have to kind of think about what kind of knowledge we're talking about, right? So if we're talking about the knowledge in DNA, what does it mean to call that knowledge? Well, that's an analogy to the knowledge in our brains, right? We're using a metaphor. But the point is that the information in DNA has been selected to serve a biological function, right?
Okay, just to clarify what I meant by qualitative, because if it all comes down to just neurons firing, then everything is just neurons firing, right? Every piece of knowledge. But we obviously wouldn't say, oh, how to ride a bike, it's just neurons firing like playing music. We obviously take those distinctions, which you use that to describe information, right?
Well, but if you know how to ride a bike, you know how to fire the right neurons at the right times so that you ride the bike. Your brain.
Okay, so there are correct neurons.
Not correct.
So there's the
neurons.
Qualitative distinction right there.
No, not
you
correct.
You just said
neurons.
correct ones at the correct time.
Well, if you say riding a bike, that has a normative aspect to it because we're human beings and we recognize that there is like a way to ride a bike. Riding a bike is a normative concept, not a It's not a descriptive concept. So, yes, we define correctness and incorrectness relative to that norm, right? So we say, okay, you're not riding it right if you fall off. But the point is that the riding of the bike is generating muscle twitches to twitch, to make your legs move and, your whole body move and grip the handlebars and all that stuff. All of that is generating muscle twitches based on sensory data coming in. And the way you're doing that is you're matching patterns. You have patterns of muscle activation, you have visual patterns that you recognize, and you're correlating those together to generate the action of riding the bike and not falling off.
Okay, maybe let's move to something like logic. Would you say logic is normative? Like, is that a conceptual model that we invented, or is logic something that's discovered?
Well, logic, okay, so the word logic can be somewhat ambiguous. So there is formal logic, right? So for example, I learned formal logic in university, right? But that doesn't mean I was illogical before I learned formal logic, right? Or, you can learn geometry, you can learn Euclidean geometry, but you don't need Euclidean geometry to walk down the street and take a corner, or know that it's faster to cut across the park than to go around it. So formal logic is kind of formal knowledge, and I make that distinction, right? Formal knowledge is that knowledge we take and put outside of ourselves. We formalize it. We write it down. We teach people how to interpret the symbols and how to manipulate the symbols. So formal logic is a kind of formal knowledge, right? Like the Boolean algebra. But then there's a kind of logic that's innate, that's built into the way the brain works. So which one of those do you mean?
That's interesting. Okay. So you would say logic is knowledge, but there's a different kind of knowledge that is innate to the brain. I would like to come back to that, but before we do that,
well, let me give you a very simple example.
Okay, go ahead.
Like, this idea you can't really have a contradiction, at once. You can't conceive of a contradiction. That's a principle of formal logic, but that's also just the way the brain works. That contradictions, don't work. They don't fit together. There will be an error will be generated in the brain if that occurs, and the brain will say, oh, that's wrong. Or we'll recognize something is wrong if we try to conceive of a contradiction. So do you see the distinction between, like, use informal logic? You have a rule of inference, which is, if you have, there's like something called, are you familiar with formal logic? Have you taken courses in it, or?
Yeah, I'm familiar with formal logic.
So the modern systems have something like, negation introduction, I think it would be, where if you assume P and then you can derive a contradiction, you can then you can conclude not P, right? Because from the assumption P, you derived a contradiction. So
right,
that's a rule of formal logic that you learn in school, or you can learn in school. Nobody has that in their head when they're born, right? But everybody has in their head that if they that they're not going to look at somebody and say, that's my grandmother, and it's not my grandmother. Right? Do you understand the distinction? Okay.
Yeah, I see where you're getting at now. But both of those are still knowledge, correct?
Right, but they're very different. They're different kinds of knowledge.
Okay, so you would say one is innate knowledge, and then one is the kind of formalized or externalized knowledge.
Right.
Okay, so this brings up a great question regarding this innate knowledge. So you're saying we're just kind of born with this inherent ability to come to know things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but at the same point, you hold that we can't know objective truth. Is this correct?
Well, I don't know what that would mean. What would objective truth be?
What is?
Hmm? I didn't
What
catch
is?
what is. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
what
truth.
is,
What is?
any idea in your head is an idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not
Yeah.
the same as what is out what it represents. There's a distinction between the idea and what it represents, right?
Correct. Which is why
So,
there's degrees of knowledge coming to know truth. Like image
well,
thinking is not knowledge of what is
okay, well, I'm not sure I
to the same
understand what you're
degree that.
saying. Let's take something simple like a cup on my desk. It's here, right?
Okay.
So I perceive it, but that perception is an idea in my brain, right? It's not the same thing as whatever it represents. It represents something, some aspect of reality, but it's not the same as that thing. The cup isn't in my head, right? So my knowledge of it is always mind dependent, right? It's brain dependent. It's not independent of the brain. It might be like almost universal that almost everybody looks at it's going to say that's a coffee cup. But I mean, well, some people wouldn't if they've never had coffee. The Sentinel Islanders wouldn't say it's a coffee cup. But do you understand that issue, right? That you don't have direct access to reality, or at least I don't think we do. I think we have brains, and brains create models,
Okay.
and
So
models are not what they represent.
what are they modeling and representing if not reality?
Oh, they are representing reality. Yeah, they're just not reality. That they're not what they represent, right? So the idea of the cup is not the cup. It's something else. It's the firing rates of 100 million neurons or something. Who knows? We don't know exactly what it is, right? But it's some state of the brain. It's a brain state, but it's not what that brain state represents.
Okay, but that will be the access to reality there, which we do it through representations, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, our access to reality is mediated by representations. So when you open a door, right, your brain generates a model of the door and the door handle and all that, and your action is based on the model, right? You reach out to grasp the door handle, and that action is generated and calibrated to fit the data of the senses, but also it's a pattern because you've opened doors thousands of times, right? So it activates a pattern, but then it's also taking into account the unique circumstances, like the handle might be a bit lower, higher, whatever. So we're all of our access to reality is mediated by representations, ideas, in other words. That's I guess the key point. And the representation reality distinction is just it's there. Like we're not able to get past
And you
it.
would say knowledge exists on the level of representation. It's like no,
Oh boy, he just jumped. He fell off after roboting.
Oh no, did we lose him completely?
Yeah. Does he know that? Can you? I can ping him in Discord, I guess. I think he probably knows.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll ping him on. Well, I'll go to Discord. Okay. That's the problem with living in Idaho, or am I not supposed to say that? I think he's open about that, right?
No, he knows. He
Yeah,
understands. He's got cowboy internet.
yeah, cowboy internet.
Yeah.
Wow, that's something. I mean, normally you could be kind of proud of being a cowboy and having cowboy internet, but on a live stream, it might be a liability.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a liability. I think the first podcast we ever did together, Ethan and I, we had to just trash it because it was no good.
Oh yeah. Well, live
Yeah.
streaming is always risky that way. I've never done it, but I listen to them, and yeah, you get these issues.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm on the wet west coast of Canada, but I do have good internet here.
That's good. The west coast of Canada,
Yeah,
so Vancouver,
yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, that general area, yeah. Okay, we
Yeah.
got you back.
I can only see BlitheringGenius's screen. Is my camera on? I
Yeah,
can't
your
tell.
camera's on.
Your camera's
Okay,
on.
let me turn it off to try to help. Okay.
All
All
right.
right. So, all right. I think I remember where I lost connection.
Okay.
You were talking about the door handle and everything that goes into that, and I asked about the innate knowledge, and you said that itself is a representation
No, okay.
of.
Wait, the innate knowledge is not a representation.
Okay, but when you go and grab a door handle, that's not a model. You're saying that
No,
is reality
there's a
itself.
model, but that's not innate. You weren't born knowing how to open doors.
Okay, so maybe could you tell me if innate knowledge is a model then? Is it a representation?
No, I wouldn't. No, and that's why I make those distinctions, right? Procedural, conceptual, representational, formal, and we could go beyond that. We'd add things like cultural, whatever. Um,
Hmm.
but you have you have a brain, right? And the brain does certain things, and it does things that are not random, that are evolved. So that in itself, we could call that a kind of knowledge, okay? Um, and that's necessary to have the other kinds of knowledge, because if the brain didn't do those things, it wouldn't generate knowledge. So what it does as you go through life is it acquires conceptual knowledge and also some representational knowledge, like you remember specific things. These could also be called semantic and episodic memory, although I think those terms are a bit misleading. But and then it gets applied, like when you walk up to the door, the concept of door, the concept of open door, that kind of pattern is activated, and it combines all those aspects that I explained, like sensory, emotional, and motor together. It correlates them, and that's what you need to drive action, right? You need to correlate different things, different excuse me, different kinds of information.
Okay, so I think I'm tracking here, but I'm still trying to understand how is it that you are able to know that we don't have access to ultimate reality? That would be a kind of knowledge, right? To know that, which
Hmm.
means you know something about ultimate reality. So is it that's
Well,
the only thing you know about ultimate reality? So we don't have direct access to it. It's only
well, I know
representations
lots
because
of
when you're
things
talking
about
about that, it's
reality.
coming from a third. What's that?
I know lots of things, like, I know how to make coffee. And I believe, or you could say I know, that, yeah, this is how our brains work, and we don't have access to objective reality. Our
Well, how do
access
you
is
know that
mediated.
though? That's what's
Well,
in
because it's
question.
a
Is how do you
theory
know
that
we don't
might
have access to
be,
ultimate
because
reality?
it's okay. So that's a theory, right? A philosophical scientific theory that my brain generated in the same way it generates any other kind of theory.
Okay, so there's no way of falsifying it?
Well, I don't know what you mean. Obviously, there are ways of falsifying things, but not to pass, like, the Rene Descartes sitting in the armchair standard. Nothing, right? I mean,
So you
it's just
said
a
that
theory, right? You come up with all
it's a
kinds of theories,
theory.
right?
Right, right. Okay. Well, I want to bring that theory into question then because
Sure.
to theorize about that, you would have to then admit that you have some knowledge of the nature of ultimate reality in order to know that we do not have access to it, direct access
I
to it.
don't agree. I mean, it's just a theory that gets generated to explain things. So, like, if I don't need direct
Yeah, but
access
it's a
to reality.
contradiction. So it
No,
doesn't
there's no
really explain
contradiction.
much.
What do you think is the
Okay.
contradiction?
Okay. I know I don't have access to ultimate reality. That
Hmm.
means I know something about ultimate reality that doesn't allow me to have access to it. You're
Yes,
making a
but know
knowledge claim about
something
the
and
state of
have
ultimate
access are not.
reality.
Okay, so your error is to confuse have direct access with know something.
What does it mean to have direct access then?
Well, I mean, I don't know, because it doesn't even make sense, right? To put the cup in your head or to leap out of your brain into the cup. I don't know. I'm saying my
What?
theory is that we use representations to relate to reality, and the representations are not reality itself. Okay, now that itself is a representation. It's a theory.
But
It's a
that
kind of.
implies that you know about what reality itself is in order to know, well, this
No,
isn't
no, it
reality
doesn't.
itself. So how do you know that it's not reality itself
No,
if you
it's
don't
just
know
a
what reality
theory.
itself is?
No, no, it's just a theory of the brain, right? I mean, you're assuming. I think what you're assuming is that knowledge must be objective fact or direct access to reality, as opposed to what I've already defined or I've already described as a kind of knowledge, right? That I've formed theories, you know, like I didn't have direct access to a bicycle. My brain wasn't, you know, leaping out of my skull into the bicycle when I learned how to ride it, and my brain wasn't communing with direct reality or something like that when I formed these philosophical scientific theories. It was just theorizing.
Okay, so I think this may be a bigger topic here that we should maybe get into, which is you're starting with the presupposition that knowledge is contained or produced by a brain, which is a physical material thing, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that's a presupposition. I mean, that's a theory, right? It's a pretty good
Okay.
theory. It's a pretty good theory because we know, you know, if you get hit in the head, it affects a lot of things. And we kind of know that changes to genes that affect the brain, you know, affect
Right.
your ability to think in certain
Well,
ways.
if you're listening to Led Zeppelin on the radio and you break the radio, it doesn't mean that the radio generated Led Zeppelin.
Oh, true, true. I mean, you could say that
So
the
it
brain
doesn't
is just some
necessarily
kind of
mean that.
receiver,
Right.
but that I don't think that theory would explain very much. Like, if it's a receiver, why do you, you know, you spend years to learn something. Like Led Zeppelin spent years learning to play guitar, so
Mm-hmm.
you know, they didn't just pick up the signal. They had to learn it. They had to do it, right? And generate the abstractions in the brain. So it's a good theory because it explains the data that we have
Correct.
of human behavior, of introspection, and also we have, like I said, mechanical analogs now that do more or less what I'm talking about. They abstract knowledge from raw data.
Do you think material can learn? Like matter? Do you think matter can learn?
Um, well, I mean, like it's a system, right? I mean, when people use matter, they're trying
What's
to.
a system?
Well, again, it's just what's matter. I guess I'll turn it back to you. I mean,
Let's just say something like that which can be measured according to depth and width and breadth and volume and
okay, so you can measure a
etc.
brain. So brain is then matter, according
Mm-hmm.
to you, right?
Well, brain is composed of matter, correct?
Well, but a brain. Okay, so is that
Yeah,
what you're
brain is
asking?
matter.
Can a brain
Yes,
learn? Are you
yes.
asking if a brain can learn? I
I'm
would say
asking if
yes.
matter can, because brain
Well,
is matter.
okay.
Is brain matter?
I mean, I don't know because I don't. I think
You don't know if
these
brain's matter?
Well, I wouldn't use the term the way you're using it, right? Like I would say that there's more to a brain than just the matter, because if you take the matter, it's not just the matter, not just the material constituents, it's how they are arranged, right? And it's also their state of motion in a sense. So if you took the atoms of a brain and put them in a jar, that would not do anything. It would not
So
learn.
what is it that is learning, I guess is what I'm asking. Like when you learn a song, what is it, the brain? That's
Yeah,
what's
it's the
learning?
brain. Yeah.
So you are the brain?
Well, that's one. Again, you can have nested identities. I mean, I would say that you are your DNA more so than you are your brain, but that's a secondary type of identity, is your brain. I
Okay,
mean, there's
so
also a kind of identity which is just your consciousness in the moment or your consciousness. There are
right.
different, you know, or your body.
So you're not necessarily saying like matter can learn. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's about the arrangement and these motions. Now, let's say something like music, you would say, well, music isn't material, right? It's not physical.
Yeah, it consists of, well, I would say it consists of information. What would you say it consists of?
Yeah, I would say something like that for sure.
Okay.
So what is it that is able to, because in order for something to perceive information or learn information, there has to be something in common there, right? So I guess what I'm asking is, what is it that allows the brain to learn and to perceive information and process information, which is what we'd call, learning?
Well, we have, first of all, the sensory nerves, right, which carry information to the brain. So we
Okay.
have, in the case of music, the organs of hearing, right, the ears, the cochlea, the hair cells, which are stimulated by different pitches, you know, and this changes the firing rates of the auditory neurons in the auditory nerve, which carry the information to the brain, and then in the brain, that information is correlated to other things. So, for example, if I hear the opening chords of, say, a Led Zeppelin song or a Beatles song, they'll activate that stored, memory of that song, that concept, because I've heard a song multiple times. So I've formed an abstraction of it. And I'll be able to fill in the remaining information, and the information that comes, the chords that come next, or the sounds that come next will be generated, or the lyrics that follow will be generated in my brain before I hear it, right? You play me the opening and cut it off, I'll hear the rest of it. In a sense, I won't hear it, but it'll be in my mind. So how is it possible for that to happen? Well, because the information goes in, there's a process of induction that abstracts concepts from that information and stores that as a different kind of information, conceptual knowledge, which then later can be recognized, right? That's pattern recognition, and then applied to either interpret new information or generate output, like motor output.
Okay. And then the information, you said, information itself is just neurons firing, right?
Well, I tried to make this distinction, right? That if what I actually said is information is anything that can have different states.
Then you said, which is really just neurons firing.
Well, in the case where we're talking about information in the brain, right, or knowledge, that kind of information consists of if you're talking about the raw data from which we induce concepts and by which we recognize concepts, that is semex. It is sensory, emotional, and motor data. But again, I also said you could think of the data in a DNA strand as knowledge, right? And that is also information. Well, there's information in a light switch. It can be in two states. So you could say there's information in the switch, and then there can be information in the mind. So neurons firing, that's one thing that has different states. So it can hold information, right? A transistor can hold information, right? A flip-flop, whatever, a logic circuit can hold information. Many different things can hold information. But if we're specifically focusing in on, how we learn and what's going on in the brain, we're talking about probably, I would assume, firing rates of neurons.
Okay. So I do want to go somewhere with, this kind of interplay of information and data. There was one more thing there. Information, data, and patterns. But before doing so, you mentioned something when you're talking about the brain and, how it processes information, organizes it, arranges it. And you mentioned the mind. To you, is mind just the same thing as the brain, or do you see a difference there? Is it a different category? How do you view the mind?
Well, I think there is consciousness, which is like the information content of probably a certain part of the brain, although I don't really know. Like, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I mean, it's very clear that consciousness is not the totality of the information in the brain, right? It's a very tiny amount. So when you talk about the mind, it could be construed as consciousness only, which is the very tiny tip of an iceberg of information. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, I don't believe in a soul or some kind of other thing that's in the brain or communing with the brain.
So you would just say mind is consciousness, which is generated by the brain.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to say it, yeah.
And you would define consciousness as a kind of awareness, or how would you describe it?
Well, I mean, you could say it's awareness and will. I mean, we're always going to have the problem of the, infinite regress of definitions, though. I mean, I think mind, you could say it's just what we can introspect about. You could also say it's the integrative, kind of executive process that directs, basically that directs action and awareness. So, like, most of the things that we do are subconscious, right? Like I gave the example of opening the door. Normally, when you open a door, you're not conscious of it. You're not really mindful of opening the door, but you could be, right? And there are mental exercises you can do, like mindfulness meditation and stuff, that alter the state of the mind to include or exclude information. But like the information, when you're opening a door, the information necessary to do that is obviously in the brain and being processed in the brain, right? But it's not, you're not consciously thinking about it. So I guess that's the distinction I'm making there.
Okay, so you wouldn't. Well, is subconscious still consciousness?
No, 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 no,
It's not.
no, no.
Okay. So subconscious would be, I mean, obviously just going according to the word itself there would be below consciousness, right? And so that's not mind?
Well, I wouldn't call it that, but again, I mean, these are not like sacred words to me, right? These are just an attempt. These are just words that I use to try to convey certain ideas, you know. So, like, I'm not hung up on the word, but the point is that there are, like, a lot of the information processing that's done in the brain is not, does not, you have no memory of it really, or you have no, like, think about it this way. When you make a conscious choice or judgment, right? That's that's a tiny percentage of all of the decisions that are made, right? So think about opening the door. How many do you suppose different signals must be sent from the brain to the muscles in the hand, the arm, and the entire body to do that? Like maybe a million or something, right? Or maybe
A
just,
lot, yeah.
yeah, right, right. So you're certainly not thinking to yourself, well, should I twitch this muscle fiber in my forearm, right? I mean, this is not how things happen. We just, you might think, should I make myself a cup of coffee? So you have that very abstract idea, that's a representation. And then that's translated into all kinds of actions. And then as you go about that, you're making all kinds of perceptions that are being used to generate the actions. But none of that is really in what I would call consciousness, because it doesn't require that kind of executive level decision making. So, yeah, I mean, I do think there's a big distinction between the totality of what the brain is doing and what we think of as the mind, which is more or less what we can describe, we can describe the internal events. You could say, well, I made a choice. But you can't like describe, well, I twitched this muscle fiber, because you don't know that you twitched that muscle fiber, right?
So would it be mechanistic then, like the twitching of that muscle fiber, or is there, do you have an idea of a kind of will involved in it?
No, there's a will, but the will is mechanistic.
The will is mechanistic.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does that work? How can a will be a mechanism?
Well, how could it not be? I mean,
well, if let's say there's like, I don't know, it rains, would you say there's a will behind that, or is that mechanistic, or?
Well, no, I wouldn't call that the will, because it's not this specific process that's in a brain that has a certain function in a brain. That's the
Is it a
rain
mechanism,
happening. Yeah, I didn't say every mechanism is the will, right? But I said the will is a mechanism, yeah. It's a certain kind of mechanism.
Okay, and
it's like saying a carburetor versus, I don't know, leaf blower or something. That's not a good example, but like, I don't know, a computer versus a train. I mean, they're both mechanisms. They're not the same.
Okay, so, but mechanisms, they're not, they're like predetermined, aren't they?
Sure, yeah.
So how can the will be predetermined? That's
How could it not be?
contradictory.
How could it not be predetermined? I think it just seems like it's ridiculous, because, you're not aware of how it's predetermined. From your perspective, it's not predetermined, but that doesn't mean it isn't predetermined.
So are you making any of your choices, or
Yeah,
is it just a mechanism?
Well, both.
Is it
I mean, you're making
predetermined,
them,
though?
and it's you're a mechanism. So when you make a choice, that's the mechanism making the choice.
And it's a predetermined choice, so it's not
Well, yeah, but
really
it's not
like,
from your perspective. From your perspective, you mull it over. The process of making it involves all this anxiety and pondering and wondering and weighing all these things, and then eventually it trips over, and you make the choice. And you could say
okay,
that's all
so
predetermined at some very low level, right? But we couldn't
Mhm.
know it in advance.
Well, okay, so how do you, oh, maybe this is, okay, maybe this is why you don't believe in objective truth, and I'm thinking about
No,
this
it's a
coming from
different
this.
thing, but I guess you could say they're related. I mean, I have a,
Well, it seems like they're related, because then you would have no way of actually knowing
well, I'll
anything
tell you how they're
if it's
related.
all predetermined mechanisms.
No, no, that doesn't change
It's
anything.
just a thing
No,
happening,
they're
though.
related in the sense that, these are all things that, like, they're all, the notion of objective truth and the notion of the free will or whatever are all kinds of illusions in a way that are just naive. And when you understand what's going on, then yeah, they disappear, right?
Wait,
Um,
hold on. How would you know they're illusions unless you know something objective about the state
I
of
don't have to
reality?
know something objective, right? Knowing
So you said
about
it's a theory,
reality
right?
isn't having objective knowledge of reality.
Wait, what? Knowing about reality is
Yeah, so
not
I have
having
knowledge of the
objective
brain. I
knowledge of
know
reality.
that, yes, I know.
What does that mean?
What it means is that,
It's subjective?
well, just like I know about this coffee cup, right? That's a theory in my mind or a model in my brain. So I have a model in my brain about what is will. I have a model. And when you start thinking about yourself, when you start theorizing about yourself philosophically and psychologically, some of these naive assumptions or things that just kind of, we take for granted, right? Like we take the will for granted. But once you start thinking about it, then yeah, you can create something that I call a subject
Hold on.
object dissonance.
If
It's
you
like a kind of
with that
cognitive
coffee cup,
dissonance. Hmm?
let's take that coffee cup. Okay, you say, "Hey, I see a coffee cup on my table." If
Mm-hmm.
another guy were to walk up and say, "I don't see a coffee cup. There's no coffee cup there." Are
Mm-hmm.
both of those equal according to their truth value? Would you say there is no truth value?
Well, I don't think there is some kind of objective truth value, but of
So
those
they're
two
both right.
models, one of them will either like work for generating experience or it won't. Like let's say that I reach for the coffee cup and that the guy's there, he's saying that's a beaver, and I'm like, no, it's a coffee cup, and I reach for it and I feel fur. Okay, well now I'm going to think I'm insane, right? But if I feel the handle and I pick it up and I drink some coffee, I'm going to be like, no, it's a coffee cup. You're crazy. Now, how could I get it? I can't get outside my brain and see it from some other perspective to sort of make some other judgment about who is right. I
Well,
have
you're
to make the
getting
judgment
outside
from
of
my
your
perspective, right?
you're going outside of your brain when you say that things are just mechanisms. You're going
Well, I'm
outside
not
your
going
brain when you
outside of
say
my
we don't have
brain.
access to
No, no,
ultimate
no. I didn't
reality.
I didn't go outside of my brain to make that judgment. I was in my, I am my brain, right? So I made that judgment with my brain. My brain made that judgment.
Okay, but to say I don't have access to direct ultimate reality, or let's
Hmm.
say, but you said that's different than having knowledge of
Right.
ultimate reality,
Knowledge is
right?
not
So
direct
we can
access.
have knowledge. We can have
Yeah.
knowledge of of ultimate
Right.
reality.
Because we capture the if we have knowledge, the knowledge means that the regularities of our experience are going to be we're going to have regularities of experience that knowledge will be able to predict. So that if the concepts in our brains can compress the information of SEMEX, sensory, emotional, and motor data, then that's what knowing is really. That
So what do you mean by
that's
access then? When you say, well, we can't access that,
well, I
what's
don't know.
access? Because to
What
me,
do
that's
you mean
knowing,
by it?
as
What do you
knowledge,
mean? I mean,
knowing,
honestly, for this
knowledge.
whole discussion, you've been sort of interrogating me, but like, I don't. What is your theory? Like, I've been giving you a theory, and I'm trying to flesh it out. I haven't really heard much about your theory, so why don't we switch it around here, and you try to explain to me, like, what the knowledge is when you see a coffee cup, and how you know it's there, and what's going on. How about you try to explain that?
Okay, yeah, sure. Go ahead. You can ask me questions. I'd be happy to explore that.
Well, I just like you to explain it. What happens when you see a coffee cup?
What happens when you see a coffee cup is you are experiencing the existence of a coffee cup in reality.
Okay, what does that mean? How are you experiencing it?
You see a physical cup which
Okay, what
exists.
does it mean to see a physical cup?
It means to perceive it. with your mind.
Okay, but
Through
how
your
does the mind
eyes.
perceive it?
The mind perceives it by perceiving it. What do you
Well,
mean? What is?
I
How
mean,
does the mind perceive
well, I've
it?
been giving you a theory of all this stuff. So
Right.
now I'm asking for your theory. I've told you,
Okay.
right? The data comes from, photons, whatever, coming from the cup, go into, hit the photoreceptors in the eyes, change the firing rates of neurons. The information goes in, it's matching patterns, it's being interpreted, concepts being applied. I've explained all that from my, in my theory. Now, how would you explain it?
No, that's fair. Yeah. So when you see a coffee cup, you're experiencing a physical instantiation of something that is participating in higher, I guess, forms is what we would call them. That's how we account for the regularity, is we would just call them forms. There's overarching principles which are intelligible, and because we are knowers, meaning we have intelligibility ourselves, we are able to commune with that, and we are able to
You
recognize
haven't
the
explained
intelligible
how you
content.
actually, how do you see it? How does the information about the cup being there get into your brain?
Well, we come from different models. I don't believe that
So I'm
brain
asking you,
produces.
okay.
Yes.
So how does
okay.
it get to
So
your
that
mind,
let's.
that mind, whatever?
Okay. Yeah. So the mind is a knower. That's how we describe, as Platonists, we describe ourselves as being knowers. Like that is who we are as an identity, as a being. We are knowers. So everything kind of comes down to that, because as epistemic realists, we believe that knowledge is real, which is an intelligible content that we can come to commune with. And through our life and experience, we are able to converge upon these intelligible contents, which we would call forms. And this accounts for the regularity. And so we are able to directly access the intelligible content of what is there due to our being intelligences.
Okay, so if I put a blindfold on you, are you going to know the cup is there?
No, I'm not going to know the cup is there.
Why not?
Because the cup is physical, and we are in a physical world, and my eyes are my physical access to the vision of physical objects.
So how does that?
Physical
does that work?
knows physical, intelligible knows intelligible.
Well, how does that? Well, you're just using the word. You're saying I was using the word pattern to carry a lot of. You're using the word knowing as a presupposition here, right? Which in a discussion about a theory of knowledge is kind of like trying to beg the question entirely.
Okay, yeah.
How does
No,
the
that's fair.
information get from the cup into you, whatever you are? How are you communing with the cup? If I put a blindfold on you, you can't see the cup, so the information doesn't flow through to the photoreceptors. It doesn't flow through the nerves, the visual nerves. You're not going to see the
Right.
cup, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
But
so
the difference is my eyes don't process information, my mind does. And the eyes have to perceive that information, which is physical, so I have to look at it with my
you think the
physical
eyes perceive?
Well, what do you mean by perceive? Because
Well, I think perception usually means that a model of three-dimensional reality, a model of that enables action and so on, whereas all the retina does is it has, images on it that are the
Conveys,
activation of
you might say.
photoreceptors.
Okay, yeah. So I would say the eyes convey to the mind which perceives.
Okay. And so how does the mind perceive the cup from the information of the photoreceptors?
Due to the likeness of the intelligible nature of both.
Well, it doesn't really explain anything. What do you mean? The likeness of the intelligible nature of both?
Correct. Yeah. So
I mean, I don't understand.
maybe
what that
let me
means,
back
so-
up. Let me back up a little bit. So the world, as I see it, is a cosmos. Okay, which just means it's ordered, and I think you would agree with that. There is order, and so we have to have an ordering principle, and I believe that ordering principle is intelligibility. So intelligibility is, I mean, it does kind of reach a bedrock at intelligibility, I believe, because again, we're talking in the realm of belief at this point, because I can't convey knowledge to you. So anytime I convey any account for what is given, or, let's say I try to describe to you, oh, well, there's a cup here. I believe there's a cup here. And then you try to bring me into the three horns, the Gettier problem, the trilemma. It's going to fall flat on its face. I'm not able to justify that through and through. So at some point it does reach a kind of infinite regress, and we have to appeal to something outside of belief to go into the realm of being, which is the intelligible. And the intelligible cannot be conveyed through words because you're instantly entering into a system of belief rather than knowledge. So I'm not going to be able to convince you of knowledge based off of the account I give of a representation. So that's where I actually agreed with you, except I think there's a disagreement there because I don't believe representations are knowledge. You do. I don't. I think representations are errant, whereas knowledge is inerrant.
So you wouldn't say that there's a cup on your desk?
Well, yeah, I would, but I can't convey that to you. You would have to have the exact same experience
but
as me.
isn't that a representation? Or is that not a representation?
Which?
Your knowledge that there's a cup on your desk.
No, the knowledge itself is not a representation. The belief, the model that I make of it, the representation I make of it is a representation,
Well, what's
which are
the
the words.
difference here then?
The difference here is the knowledge is something that is direct and intuitive, meaning it's unitive. I can't, as soon as I create a subject-object distinction, I am entering into the realm of doxa, belief, or representations, because I am now not united with the object through that experience of directly perceiving that. So when there's a cut, like someone doesn't have to convince me that the sky is blue, right? Someone were to say, well, prove it. I'd say, well, I'm perceiving it directly. I don't have to prove it. It's kind of like what you were saying with your models of knowledge. You don't really have to, tell a baby you don't have to teach them to be hungry. They come into this world hungry. So it's not propositional or representational. It's direct and intuitive.
Well, perception is intuitive and it's automatic compared to cognition, which is slower and can entertain hypotheticals and so on, right? So
Right.
thought and perception.
Because you're introducing
but
subject-object distinction.
Well, they both involve the subject-object distinction, but perception is automatic. It doesn't mean we're getting direct access to reality. It just means that it's happening subconsciously and automatically. But you can misperceive something, right? And there are ambiguous pictures. Somebody can show you a picture that looks like two faces or a candlestick, and you can switch between the two perceptions of it. So you can demonstrate to yourself that perception is not reality, that it is a representation.
Well, I would actually agree with you there, because we believe that everything in this world, which is physical, is a representation of something that is more real and has more ontological primacy.
Okay.
Like let me give an example. So in order to have an apple, a red apple, there has to be something called redness and there has to be something called apple, right? So
well, you need to have the two concepts to compose them in that way, basically.
Right. And the way we see it is concepts are mind dependent. Okay. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter if you agree with that. I'll answer the questions rather than ask questions. So we see concepts as being mind dependent, and there are universal concepts like logic, like beauty, like justice, like harmony. There are universal concepts that cannot be created by particular minds. They would have to be held in a universal mind. Only a universal mind could hold universal concepts.
Yeah, well, it's basically kind of like the Christian thing, but I mean,
it's different, but yeah, it's similar. They have similar
I don't
arguments.
know. I mean, this is all just, I guess I would just say this is all mysticism. Like you're not explaining anything here. You're just saying there are these things, but they don't explain anything.
When you say it's all mysticism, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, mysticism, I would say, is appealing to the unknown as a kind of pseudo-explanation.
Well, that's coming from your model. You'd say it's
Yeah.
unknown because in your model, you say, well, it's all theories. So really, you're doing the same thing. You're saying, well, we don't know it. It's a theory. That's what you base it all
No, I'm
off
not
of. Well,
saying
it's
we
just a
don't
theory.
know it. I just don't have your notion of knowledge. I think a theory, we can judge a theory to be better or worse than some other theory. We do that all the time, right?
Whoa. So now you are making a value
I
judgment.
never said we didn't make value judgments. The thing about the value judgments, you're asking me to say that there was something better about a certain kind of knowledge, right? About somebody's knowledge of music.
There's a truer knowledge and a more false knowledge, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right.
Well, actually, the false knowledge wouldn't be knowledge; it'd be a contradiction.
Well, I mean, whatever. But I didn't say anything like we can't make value judgments or that I mean, obviously everything we do, and I think I already said something to this effect, in some sense is normative because we are evolved beings, right? We're not rocks. The brain evolved to do something. And so not only are we always making value judgments and there's also a kind of implicit purpose built into that procedural knowledge, right? So there is an implicit norm of truth in the brain, but it's not
Okay.
direct access to reality. It's the compression of information. That's
this might-
that's all.
This might be something we can come together on here. You said, because you actually argue for a lot of like empirical takes. Not that you're an empiricist, but I see empiricists go a completely different direction. They don't believe there's purpose. They don't believe there's order. They don't really believe there's regulation. But you would say there is order and there is a purpose, right?
Well, the purpose is not cosmic. So you have I mean, you're a reproducing machine. So your purpose is to reproduce. And, biologically.
How do you know that?
Well, again, this is the theory, right? It's called the
Okay.
theory of evolution. You keep asking me these questions. How do I know it? I know it because I have a brain.
Okay.
The brain induces knowledge from experience, produces
But
theories.
if there's no objective truth, then what's the point of making a theory if it's not actually
Well,
accounting for anything that can be known?
Well, why would it have to be objective? Well, what even it mean for there to be objective
Universal.
truth?
Universal.
Okay, universal for what? What would that mean? I don't know what that means. I'm
Universal
a certain kind
is-
of brain, right? So somebody with a different
You're a
kind of
particular
brain
brain, yeah.
wouldn't have the same ideas about the world as me.
Would you
So-
say brain is universal though? Because you're
What
talking
do you
about
mean?
particular
I mean,
brains.
Obviously, different brains. There are different brains, and there are things that
but
don't
there's
have
brains.
brains.
They're all brains still. They have a universal, a shared universal between them, which makes them all brains.
Well, they have a
Equally
commonality,
brains.
yeah, a common form and a common function, right? A common biological function.
So those commonalities are what we are trying to get at here. That's kind of where I'm going with my questions, is I'm trying to understand what these shared elements are. What is it that they have in common? That's just what we call the forms. It's the intelligible content that is, overarching and underlying particulars,
No, but
instances.
the thing is, like, there
Which
could
you
be
call
other
patterns.
brains, right? There could be a brain, like let's say humans, exist for another million years, and maybe there's 3 species that evolved from the human as we are now, right? Or maybe we build artificial brains. It's not like there's some, it's not like every brain is going to have the same idea when it encounters something. In fact, even identical brains with different experience will form different concepts, right? The Sentinel Islander is not going to see this as a coffee cup. So he's not going to get this universal. That
What
there's a
about
coffee cup.
counting? Is that universal?
Well, I mean, it depends. Like, again, this goes back to the distinction between formal logic and innate mental processes. So there are cultures that don't count higher than 5, right? They have
Okay.
something like 1,
But they have a
2.
concept of 5.
Well, they have a formal concept of 5.
Did they invent it or did they discover that?
Well, it probably evolved culturally, so that you could
5
kinda-
evolved culturally?
Sorry, what?
The number 5 evolved
Well, yeah,
culturally?
as a number, as a word, as something that we do formally. Yeah, mathematics is an invention, right?
Okay, I'm not talking about the reference. You know the distinction between reference and referent, right? I'm talking about the content.
Yeah, but you're assuming that
5
there is a
referring to.
you're assuming that there is something that is
Yeah,
5, and I
because it's
don't agree with
coherent.
that.
It's incoherent if there isn't. If you
Why
have
is it
5,
incoherent?
if you have 5 apples and 5 oranges, what do they have in common?
Well, obviously, from my perspective, they have 5 in common, right?
Okay,
And
but
fruit
apples
and
are
other
not
things.
oranges, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the 5 that brings them distinct things into commonality?
Well, it's the number 5 that we both learned
Which is
as
what?
children.
Right. Okay.
We both
And do
learned
you
that number, right? We both learned how to count. We both read the little
Correct.
ladybug book or something, right?
So was 5
So-
discovered by the mind, or was it invented by the mind?
Well,
Not the number.
Again,
but
it
what
culturally
is referring to.
evolved because we have, 5 fingers. So even the cultures that never got past that because they don't really need to count past 5, they still have that number. But again, there could be a being that just doesn't count. Obviously, there could be lots of beings. Probably most
If
animals
they couldn't
don't
count,
count the
would they
way we
still
do.
have 5 fingers?
Well, there's probably lots of animals that don't count the way we do, right?
Okay.
Like, so if you see a sheep, so here's the thing. Here's the underlying basis of number. Like, if you are looking at a field and you see a bunch of sheep, you're going to recognize distinct entities or objects that are of the same class, right? Now, counting is the ability to assign tokens to those things, right? Now, you have a very limited ability to do that, okay? Because I don't think if you look up in the night sky, you're going to say 1,785, right? So,
Right.
so we learned this thing of putting linguistic tokens into association with objects, and that's what counting is, or beans in a gourd or whatever. We learned these little tricks, and this takes a certain kind of thought outside the brain, right? Because when you can write it down on paper or you can put beans in a gourd, now you can count higher than you can count just perceptually or whatever. So, the distinction between individual objects and then the recognition that they're of the same type, that's the underlying procedural innate basis of counting. But that doesn't mean there's some Platonic number 5 existing in some realm of forms.
No, here's the thing with the realm of forms. Again, it's not a place, like a physical place that you go to or something that's completely separate from ours. You go there when you think of the number 5. Like, that's an intelligible thing. It's not something physical. It's
Have you ever
completely
really thought of the
intelligible.
number 5, though? I mean, come on.
When you think of 5 things, you know that they're 5 things, right? That's how you know that 5 oranges are not 5 apples, yet they're both 5.
Yeah, but when you're
It's
doing
intelligible.
that,
It's
you're
not physical.
applying, yeah, but so you learned how to use numbers to think, right? And somebody who didn't learn that might not ever
Would it
think
change the
5.
fact that there's 5 things if they didn't know the language to describe it between subjects? Would it change that fact?
Well, when you say 5 things, you're using your language to describe it. So the reality is the reality,
So are the 5 things there?
but we're using models to understand it. So the
Okay.
5 is part of the model that we use to understand it, but there's also something about reality that makes that model very useful.
Wait,
Right.
hold on. I don't want to move past this. So if there's 5 coconuts on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if someone has no concept of 5, they have no numbers, they're a caveman, whatever, they've never counted anything,
Mm-hmm.
and they walk up, does it change the fact that there's 5 coconuts on the ground, or is that only the case because I've learned the language to describe?
No, there's 5
number of
coconuts
coconuts.
on the ground, but that's a
Okay,
description.
thank you. So
That's a
that's
model, right? That's a model.
Okay,
right?
it's just a description of what? A model of what?
Of some state of reality, some aspect of
Okay,
reality.
in this case, a 5 state of
From
reality.
your
What does that mean?
perspective, right? From your perspective.
So it's different from someone else's perspective? Again,
Well,
if
it
someone
could-
else
well,
walked up,
it's from
would
the
it be
caveman's
10?
perspective, yeah, it might be different, right?
Okay, but would it change the fact, or would it be 10? Would the number change?
Again, I don't believe there is this number in reality, so you're asking this loaded question. I think
So
there
what
is a reality,
Okay, there
and
is
we are
a
using
reality.
we are using this. We're using different representations of the reality, and the 5 is in the representation, and there is something.
What
about
is it
reality.
representing? What is the number 5 representing?
Okay, how would you like me to tell it to you? What can I do to tell it to you? What way
Okay.
could I convey what it's representing?
Okay,
No, answer
The-
the question. It's not rhetorical.
I am. I'm preparing it right now. Okay, so 5 is a concept you say that we invented, but I'm not talking
I know. I'm
about...
asking you. No. Very simple question. How could
Okay.
I convey this notion of 5 to you without using a representation, and without activating a representation in your mind?
Well, I would say, do you have a category for which 5 goes under?
Well, I'd have
not-
to use some words, right?
Yeah, go ahead. You can use
No,
words.
well, no. I'm saying that's how the only way I can we can talk about things is to use words, right?
So you're saying 5 only exists.
And I didn't say only exists. What I said is, look, you keep asking me this question. Well, what is there in reality? Well, you're asking me a question in language. You're asking me to give you a model of reality. That's all I can do. I can't give you reality itself. I don't know what is the thing about reality that makes the apples and oranges the same. Well, sure, it's the number 5, but that's a model. That's a representation. That's an idea.
Okay, but then I asked you, I said, are models discovered or invented?
Well, no, you didn't ask me that. You said it's the number 5.
Okay, which is a model. So is it
Yeah, so
discovered
models
or
are
invented?
generated by the brain, and the concept 5 was learned from experience by both of us when we learned how to count.
Okay, there we go. You made a distinction there, right there. You said the concept 5. That's what I'm asking about, is the concept. Was the concept itself invented or discovered?
Well, I already told you it evolved culturally.
So it was invented.
You can say it's invented if you want, sure.
Okay.
But you could also say it was
created.
discovered. You could also say it was discovered. You could say,
it was
was
discovered.
hemoglobin invented or discovered? By nature, by evolution.
Well, it would be discovered. If it was there, whether we see it or not,
Well,
it's discovered.
hemoglobin was there.
Okay.
It's a certain, very complex molecule, right? There was no
Okay,
hemoglobin
well, let's stick
in the
with
universe.
number, because I think
before-
it's more close to our everyday experience. Let's stick with number, because it's more close to our everyday experience. I don't think we need to move on to a different.
Why not?
I just told you,
giving
number's
an
closer to our
analogy,
everyday
right?
experience. I'm not a
trying to
biologist,
explain- I'm trying to explain how okay, well, we don't have to use hemoglobin, but the point
Well, then,
is...
okay, wait, hold on, because we're almost there. I'm still trying to understand, and again, I don't mean to, I'm not trying to just avoid answering questions, but I do think this is a very important topic, and it will kind of tease out some of the differences in our worldview and where we can come together. So you said the concept 5 was culturally, what? It was culturally discovered or generated.
It was evolved. It's really a word. You can think of it as a word.
It was evolved.
Right?
I'm not talking about the word, though. I'm talking about
What
the
are you talking
concept
about?
behind the word.
But words are
5.
concepts. Words are concepts. I'm not talking about a specific instance of saying it. A word is a concept.
Okay,
It's a pattern.
5 is a reference, correct?
A reference.
Yes,
I
it's
wouldn't say it's a
referencing
reference.
something.
No, it's a
You don't think
concept.
5? Okay. What is the? What do you wait? You don't think 5 is a reference to something?
No, it's a concept.
What about a word?
Is blue a reference to something?
To the color blue, yes. The word blue, BLUE, is a reference to the
No, I
reality of what is behind that word, which is
I don't
blue,
think
the
that's
thing
a
itself.
reference. I think that's just a concept, right? That can be applied to different things.
Okay, so you're saying that blue, the word BLUE, is the same as blue itself?
No.
Okay,
I don't know
so
where you
are
got
they
that
both
from.
concepts? Okay, well you said
Well,
it's
what is
a
blue
concept.
itself? I mean, what is blue? I mean, you're presupposing this view in which the ideas in our minds and the concepts and so on exist outside of our minds. But I don't have that presupposition. So no, I don't have to assume that blue exists outside of our minds.
Okay, so well, in that case, there's no way to be incorrect about anything.
No, there are ways to be incorrect because you are a mind.
Okay,
If
so
you think you don't know that there's a truck coming and you walk across the street, yeah, you'll get killed.
okay, to me, the number 5 is referring to your number 6. Am I wrong?
Well, I would assume so because we both grew up in the same culture, didn't we? And we both speak the same language.
So culture determines
But I mean,
what is true
I don't
and
know.
false?
I mean, I would say it doesn't refer to anything. I would say it's just a word and it's a concept that we've both learned from experience. And if you're saying
if
that
it's just a word, then
our
there's no
concepts-
incorrectness about
no,
it.
no, because we could look at two things, and if you say blue and I say green, there's a disagreement. If we look at two things and you say 5 and I say 6, there's going to be a disagreement. But that's not going to happen.
But you
right?
say that was established. What is truly 5 or truly 6 is established by culture?
Well, I'm not saying something is truly 5 or 6. I'm
Okay,
saying
then again,
that
you
our
can't be
brains-
incorrect. If that's
no,
true, you
I'm
can't be
saying our
incorrect.
brains will generate the same kind of idea, and the same words will come to our minds when we look at the same thing because we have this common brain and we have this common culture. So we're going to make the same models in our brains. We're going to have the same concepts more or less. And if you look at the sky and I look at the sky and we look at something else, right? Because our eyes work the same way and our brains work the same way, and we learn the same language, those things are all going to be correlated. That's a regularity of reality, right?
But at the end of the day, they're all arbitrary.
I didn't say that. Why are they arbitrary?
Because they're culturally invented.
I just said there was a regularity to
reality.
reality. No.
Okay.
Culture's not arbitrary. You think culture's
Okay.
arbitrary?
If you're saying you can invent things and just change definitions, and
Well,
yeah,
the
you
English
say, well,
language is invented, but I wouldn't say it's arbitrary.
okay, but it's. I'm
has a
saying it's
function.
not. You in your worldview, it isn't grounded in anything except for particular brains that agreed on something.
Right. So the English language, for example, is just grounded in the fact that you have a bunch of brains that learned the same language and use it in the same ways. And so they recognize the same word when they see the same object, right? Because there's regularities to reality and there are regularities to brains. And so these things can be in alignment.
Okay, what accounts for these regularities? Because it seems like
Well, the
this
order
is a
of
huge-
reality and the way the brain works.
Okay. So again, this is something we can come together on. Order.
Mm-hmm.
What accounts for order? Like there has to be some kind of a grounding principle, right, that gives way to order. It's ordered according to something. So what is it ordered according to? Is that arbitrary? Do we have any way to know that?
All I can do is give you my theories of the world from my perspective, right? I can't go to some God's eye perspective and tell you how the world is ordered, can I? So all I can tell you is how my theory of the brain and my theory of evolution and all these theories, my theories of physics, all I can do is give you my theories.
Then it's not epistemology. It's not the study of knowledge. It's the study of theory.
Well, you can call it that if you want. I mean, but then then it's just. I mean,
oh, that's what it is.
You're just changing.
You're just saying you can't know. It's theory. So
I didn't say I couldn't know. You're the one who insists that knowledge must be this objective communing with reality.
Hold on. You just said there's no way of me knowing that. It's just a theory.
Well,
it seems like that's your cop-out to avoid kind of taking any kind of metaphysical stance about the nature of reality, because in your eyes there's something dogmatically wrong with that. So instead what you do is when I press you on it, you say, well, it's just a theory.
My best theory is that
which is neurons firing, right?
Direct access. There's no magical realm. Our brains can't, or our minds don't leap out of our skulls. My theory is that, information comes into the eyes, it comes into the ears, it comes into the skin, and the brain processes it. And from the brain's perspective...
Did that come through the eyes, ears, and skin? That notion that you just stated? That it comes through the eyes, ears, and skin?
You didn't even let me finish the sentence. The brain processes the information. The brain generates abstractions. We're talking at a very abstract level, right? Which is like way removed from direct experience. But it all comes down to direct experience. Ultimately, if a physicist makes a measurement, they have to look at something.
Wait, direct experience is sensory, though, right?
Yes, that's the level. That's the skin of the brain.
Is information sensory then?
What?
Is information sensory?
Oh my God, we already gone through this, right? I explained to you what information is, and that it's kind of a fundamental concept.
Okay, so it's not sensory; it's a concept.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
You just said
what do you think the senses are?
Well, you just said it comes through my ears, it comes through my eyes.
I think you're playing games. What are the senses?
I'm not playing
what comes
games.
through my eyes then? What comes through my eyes?
Okay, it's all okay.
What is it that comes through my eyes? Stop playing games. What is it? It's information.
It's information, right?
Right.
Okay.
So why are you playing this game?
Because you're saying it's trapped in your skull, which is physical.
My brain is in my skull. You don't think my brain is somewhere else? The information of my consciousness is in my skull. Do you think it's somewhere else?
Okay, so information is trapped in a physical container, which is your skull.
What the fuck are you talking about? I didn't say all information is. I said the information in my brain.
You said you can't get out of your brain, which is in your skull.
What are you talking? Yes, the information in my brain is in my skull. Yeah, wow. Okay. We agree then, right? The information in my brain is in my skull. The mind is in my skull.
Information
Can we agree on that? Or
what's
no?
that?
You don't agree,
no.
right?
No,
okay.
Of course
so
I don't.
That's the fundamental disagreement, right? You have a theory that your mind is not in your skull. That's the fundamental disagreement.
No, how can a physical object trap something immaterial?
How can a physical object contain information? Is that what you're asking me? That's the definition of information. That there can be different physical states. A switch is an example.
Is that
the switch could be
physical?
Up or down. That's information.
What you just said, is that physical? Different physical states. What's a state? It's not physical. Right?
Well, you can call it physical. I just think you're playing games. I don't know what you're
No,
talking
I'm not.
about.
Okay, I'm trying to get down to this issue here, which is you're saying, well, it's all physical states, it's all sensory, and when I
When did
ask
I
you
say
about,
it's all sensory? You just keep making these
you
ridiculous
said it comes.
paraphrases of
Hold
what I
on. No, I'm
said.
not. Okay, let me back up. Then I'll be more specific. You said that it enters through sense perception, the knowledge, the information. Let's say information,
No, I didn't even
and then
say that.
yes, you did. You said it enters
No,
through
I
eyes.
don't. There's no such thing as sense perception. I said the information enters through the senses.
What? Okay. Seems like you're playing
Perception is
games, and that's just another
processing.
way.
I said that. I explained that.
Okay. Okay, so it's sensory, and then the brain,
Well, you have sensory
Which is-
information.
okay, which the brain then processes.
Right.
Okay, but information itself is not physical. And then you said, well, it's physical states. And I said, okay, so are states physical?
Well, it's
what does that mean?
contained within physical states. So I'll give you an example. But
What
again,
is it, though? Is it physical?
No, I mean it isn't a
Okay.
thing. I mean, what
It's
could
not,
it be?
okay.
Well, if you turn a light switch, what happens to the light?
If you turn it on or off, I mean,
Well,
it depends.
either one. It switches its state, right? So the
Yes.
state of the switch changes in perfect correlation with the state of the light.
Right, and the state
right?
itself
So the
is
state
not
of
physical.
a photoreceptor might change in perfect correlation with a certain neuron, right?
Okay, could you...
So the information of a
Repeat that.
photoreceptor would be contained in the neuron, right?
In a neuron. Okay. Is a neuron physical?
Yes.
Okay, so the information is contained in the physical thing, and you're saying the information is not physical,
Sure.
and you're saying it's a state.
Well, it's contained in the state.
Okay, I'm not asking about what it's contained in, though.
Well,
that's what I'm trying to
go
get at.
back
Is
to the
what
light
is
switch
it?
and the light.
Okay.
They're two different physical objects in two different. They have their own physical states, but
Right.
those states are in perfect correlation. What do they share? Information. One has information about the other.
Which
When
is
one
immaterial.
When one is up, the other one is bright. When one is down, the other one is not radiating light.
Right. So
That's
what I'm
information.
yes. So what I'm getting at is I'm trying to figure out how you are in your model accounting for the immaterial reality, which seems to be the basis of reality according to your model. Which I would agree with that because it's all information, right?
Sure,
But
and
it's,
that's different.
It's contained in
states.
physical things. Okay, but it itself is not physical. You said.
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how do you account for the non-physical, immaterial thing which you are calling information because it seems to be the very basis of reality and it's immaterial.
Well, it's in different physical states.
I'm not asking what
And-
it's in, I'm asking what it is.
How
If
would
it's
I know? I already told you it's like a fundamental concept. So now you're, and I gave you examples, right? I gave you an example of the correlation between two things. That's all you can do to explain information.
So
If you're determined to be a tactical nihilist about it, then fine. You're determined to be a tactical nihilist about it. I'm
I'm
giving you
not,
a
no.
theory, and you can reject the theory. I mean, you could do whatever you want, right?
okay, I would say the difference is that in Platonism you can account for
You haven't
can
accounted
account
for
for information.
anything. You
Okay.
presuppose the whole concept of knowledge.
that's
You
called
just said
epistemic
we are-
realism, yes.
We are ontologically knowing, and that's the end of it.
We are
And-
that's
and you define
epistemic
what we
realism.
know
And
as
you're saying the
intelligibility.
opposite. You're saying the opposite, which is opting out of epistemology. So if you want to engage in
No, I'm not
epistemology, you
opting
have
out
to
of
say
epistemology. I'm explaining
all
what
theories.
knowledge is.
you're saying it's all
So-
theories though.
Okay, so you're saying
You said
what
I
is-
can't know, it's just a theory. The very basis of
No,
your
I never
model
said I can't
is
know. See,
information.
again, you're
You said you
lying.
can't
You're
know. You said
lying here.
Can you know
Say
information?
what
Do you
I
know
said.
information?
What did I say? Did I say we can't know?
You said you can't know information just a little
I
bit
did
ago.
not say
Yes.
that. You're lying. What did
You
I say?
didn't say that you can't know what
I said we don't have direct
information is
access
or
to
what.
objective reality.
Okay. And
I didn't say
asked-
we don't know things.
I asked, how can you account for the immaterial basis of reality, which is
Why do I
information?
have to account for the immaterial basis of reality? Is this what you
Because
do?
That's what you're.
Well, I mean, you
How-
can do that
how
all you
else
want.
do you
You
ground-
can,
wait,
you can
how do
curl
you
up
ground
into a
your
lotus
epistemology?
position and chant mantras if you want, but what does that have to do with reality?
How do you ground your epistemology if at the very root
Grounded
of it
in
is-
what? Well, I already explained it to you, right? I have a theory. My theory is grounded in me.
It's grounded in
my
theory.
Judgment.
Is a
All
theory
grounded in my
knowledge?
judgment.
Is a theory knowledge?
Yes.
Is that the same thing as knowing something, as having a theory of something?
Yes, sure. That's a kind of knowledge. I've already said that.
No, is it knowledge itself?
Well, there are multiple types of knowledge, as I said at the very
Okay.
beginning.
And then when I pressed you on what is knowledge, you said, "Well, it's something to do with information, right?"
Right.
Can you? So
Is a
what
theory
was it you said? I
information?
don't want to misquote you. I don't want to misquote you.
Is a
So-
theory information.
Is a theory information?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so there you go. So it's information, and it has a function. It represents,
Wait, so
or it's used to store, it's used to interpret and generate, or it's used to, ultimately, it's used to deal with reality, right? In terms of interpreting sensory experience and generating motor output. That's what a theory is ultimately used to do.
okay.
So it's a thing in the brain, right? It has a biological function.
But
which is
this
to
came
process
from me
information.
asking what knowledge is, right? And you said,
Okay.
"Oh, it's information. Knowledge is information about data, which is
Right.
states of things, right?
Well, I said I said there's different types.
Right.
So there's the
But I'm not
innate-
asking about different types. And what is it they all have in common is knowledge. So I'm asking about knowledge itself.
Well, I think the only thing they have in common is that they all have a biological function. But even that might be somewhat.
What?
They are types. They're all induced. I mean, that's
does
another
it
thing
have-
you could say.
Okay. Well,
They
I'm
all-
confused.
they
What do they have
all
to do with
capture
biology?
Regularity.
Knowledge is biological?
Well, yeah.
It has a biological function? It's biological?
Yes. Of course.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, what do what do you think it's there for, right? Why do you think brains can know things? Why do you think a fish needs to know if a shark is behind it or something like that, right?
Okay, so you're basically taking like an evolutionary kind of reductionist approach to this. Which
All,
is it all for survival? Is that what you're saying? It's all to
ultimately,
live?
it's all for reproduction. So even the most abstract knowledge we have, we're still
Okay.
using it. Our brains evolved
Okay.
to abstract knowledge from experience so that they could use the knowledge to generate action. The brain is a behavior generating mechanism. That's all it is.
Okay, so it's all for the end purpose of reproduction.
Right. That's
And
what it was
what is the
selected for.
purpose of reproduction?
It doesn't have one.
It doesn't have a purpose.
No.
So life doesn't have a purpose.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. One
Well,
life.
if the ultimate purpose is purposeless, which is reproduction, then it has no purpose.
Well, if that's the way you're going to interpret it, I mean, I would say
That's
that
what you
each
just said.
No,
Okay, I'll allow
you're
you
not
to
letting
clarify.
me say. Look, each
Okay, I'm sorry.
organism
Sorry.
has its own purpose, which is to reproduce. But that's
So-
it. Purpose has to
okay.
start somewhere, right? So how did it get bootstrapped into existence?
Oh, wait, hold on. So each species has its
not
own
species,
purpose.
not species, not species.
Each life, what'd you say? Sorry.
Each organism,
Organism. Okay, each organism has a purpose, which is to reproduce,
right?
but reproduction itself, which is the common purpose of all organisms, is purposeless.
Right. It doesn't serve any higher purpose. Yeah.
Except
hey guys,
for
we got a couple minutes left, so
Okay.
if you guys want to wrap
we
up
can
on a
wrap it
couple
up.
different things,
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Do it.
Well,
You can go ahead, Blithering Genius, if you want to say like any final comments, and I'll make some final comments. Or either way, if you want to end, I'm cool with that too.
Look, I think, I mean, I'm getting a little pissed off because I think you're kind of trying to dodge that you're not giving me any answers. You haven't presented any theory of knowledge at all. You've just waved your hand at knowing some kind of ontological, that we're ontologically knowers and that there's this intelligibility. And then when I try to interrogate you about, well, how does this relate to actual real experiences, like looking at a coffee cup, or if I put a blindfold on you, you don't really have an answer, and then you try to turn it around. So, yeah, I mean, that's my position. I mean, we can, have another debate some other time, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's just my position here. I mean, I think you haven't really presented any theory at all, to be honest. You've just waved your hand, and you tried to put me on the spot, and I've given you this I've tried to explain machine learning and, to the best of my knowledge, how the brain works and how we induce knowledge from experience, and then you're going into this tactical nihilism thing, which, I've played this game before, but it's just a waste of time, right? So you have to understand, I'm presenting a theory. Now you can say, well, I don't like the theory. Fine. But Well, whatever. I mean, yeah, just go ahead. I don't want to take up more time.
Okay, and no, I think you're right. I think I did spend a lot of time asking you questions, trying to kind of pick apart your worldview and understand where you're coming from. And you didn't really, I didn't give you enough time to do the same to me. So I will take that. That's on me. I'd be happy to talk with you again, and maybe it can be a little bit more balanced in that area. And maybe I can, kind of flesh things out and present them better to where it doesn't just sound like kind of, bald assertions. But I do think that the worldview that you laid out, I mean, you talk about tactical nihilism, but it seems to be that nihilism itself is just inherent to that worldview. It's built into it from the very ground, because the ultimate purpose is to reproduce, which is purposeless. So I think we saw that there. So I don't really think it's tactical nihilism. It's just exposing the nihilism in that worldview. So the difference would be in the Platonic worldview, we are, as I said, epistemic realists, and you might, not like that and say, well, it's just assertions. But it really is the only possibility, and the impossibility of the contrary, I think, is what proves it, because it starts from, well, the world is ordered, and it's ordered according to something, which we would say is the good, which is, there's an intelligibility that comes from the good. And that is the organizing principle. And we, as intelligences, as intellects, we are able to participate in what is, which is intelligibility. And we have, intelligible forms in the Platonic worldview, which account for the universal state of things, which account for the regularity. It is the kind of intelligible content upon which these things converge. Like, that is what accounts for similarity between things. It's that there are these overarching intelligible, you might call them intelligible principles, for lack of a better word. We call them forms, and that accounts for particular instantiations in time of these overarching universal principles. I also laid out the kind of idea of, a universal mind, which has to hold universal concepts, because I don't think concepts are invented or a kind of evolution of culture. I think that they are discovered in nature. They're in nature itself. Nature works according to laws and principles which are guided by intelligence, which would be the universal intelligent mind, the mind of God, which is good. So, you might say, well, it's just a bunch of honky tonk, it's just a bunch of talk, and mystical, and that's okay. I think we can come together on certain aspects of it, but I think if you don't account for things, then it will lead to an incoherent worldview. Maybe not at the downstream level, like when you're, accounting for perception and sensory input, and the physical state of things, but at the foundation, it doesn't account for anything. So it's almost like the argument of Plato and Aristotle, and I think we're kind of coming from two different worlds, which is why, it seems like the world I'm coming from is too mystical, too woo for you, and I think the world you're coming from is just kind of working on a lot of, there's a lot of given there. Like, you just kind of take certain foundational principles as just a given, and you don't really want to examine it. You'd say, well, how could I possibly know that? Which,
Okay. I mean,
Hey.
you're really delivering on quite a lecture here. I mean, I think if we're going to wrap it up,
Okay.
it's not really fair.
Yeah,
I
I
was
was gonna
ending
say,
it right there. I was ending it right there.
Okay.
I was ending
Okay.
it right there.
Yeah.
I was just going to do a summary of my worldview. That's it.
Okay. Well, anyway, I do appreciate talking to you, and thanks also to Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And, I know I'd let you guys kind of just go at it in more of an open style. But this is a tough topic, and I think this can almost use a more structured debate style if you guys would want to deliver proper like opening statements and do something like this again. I really appreciated your worldview and sharing it. I think it's very interesting, and I've always thought that kind of nominalism and representationalism is actually an interesting counterpoint to what's happening in Platonism. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that you brought up, and definitely gave us a lot to think about.
All right. Thanks. So thanks, and yeah, I guess we'll talk later. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks for being on. Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.